They say Monday is the worst day of the week. But trust me, that's only true if you're not the one pulling the strings. Before we dive into this wild story, don't forget to like this video, drop a comment sharing your thoughts, and hit that subscribe button. Stories like this one deserve to be heard, and you won't want to miss how it ends. Now, let's get back to that Monday. I'd been at Cypher Secure for almost a decade. 10 years of late nights, endless coffee, and making sure that what we built actually worked. Not just looked good on a quarterly report. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't loud, but I was the reason our clients' data stayed locked down tighter than Fort Knox. That's why it hit different when he walked in, Cameron Tate. Cam strolled into the main office like he'd just closed $1 billion deal. Fresh haircut, tailored suit, a watch that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. He oozed confidence the way oil leaks from an old engine. Messy, slick, and bound to cause problems. "Call me Cam," he said with that kind of grin you see on people who think they're the smartest in the room, even when they don't know what room they're in. "We're going to shake things up around here. Move fast, cut the dead weight." The room gave that awkward, polite applause you hear at bad weddings and company pep talks. I just sat there, arms folded, watching the fireworks show. I'd seen his type before. All style, no blueprint. A kid playing CEO with daddy's money and a stack of business books he never actually finished. Cam wasn't here to understand the heart of Cypher Secure. He was here to gut it and remake it in his own image, one selfie at a time. What he didn't know was that while he was busy rehearsing his TED Talk voice, I was the one who kept the company's digital skeleton from falling apart. After a massive data breach almost tanked us 5 years ago, it was me who had designed the encryption protocol that turned the company around. And unlike most people, I didn't just leave it up to the company lawyers. I protected my work, quietly, methodically. In the middle of a chaotic reorganization years ago, I worked with the old CEO to ensure that the intellectual property, the very backbone of our security platform, was filed under my name. It was buried deep in the contract, a clause most people wouldn't bother to read. But it was there, and it was bulletproof. Cam had no idea. He thought he was dealing with some outdated engineer clinging to a desk. What he didn't realize was that firing me wouldn't just be a bad PR move. It would be a catastrophic, system-wide failure waiting to happen. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just smiled, sat back, watched him strut around like a rooster in a henhouse. Because sometimes the best way to win is to wait. And oh, I was very, very good at waiting. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. By the end of his first week, Cam had made it his personal mission to dismantle everything that actually worked. He cancelled the regular security reviews we held every Friday, the ones that kept our infrastructure airtight, and replaced them with something called innovation sprints. What was an innovation sprint, you ask? Well, apparently it was sitting in a glass conference room, drinking cold brew from fancy mason jars, and throwing around buzzwords like synergy and scalability until your head hurt. Real, groundbreaking stuff. Cam didn't understand how our systems worked, not the layers of encryption, not the risk models, not even the basic client compliance standards. But that didn't stop him from talking, loudly, endlessly, about moving fast and breaking things. Problem was, in cybersecurity, if you break things, people don't just lose apps or pictures. They lose businesses, they lose millions. But try telling that to a man who thinks penetration testing is a gym exercise. He started trimming staff the second week. At first it was quiet, a data analyst here, a sysadmin there, people who didn't fit the new vision. By Friday, 3 people from my old team were gone. Good people. The kind who could spot a vulnerability blindfolded with one hand tied behind their back. The office changed overnight. The buzz of collaboration turned into a tense, hollow silence. Conversations in the break room dried up. Eyes dropped to the floor when Cam walked by. Fear has a way of moving through an office like a cold wind, slipping under doors and between desks, chilling everyone it touches. I kept my head down. Cam would strut past my desk sometimes, slowing just enough to flash that polished, empty smile. He started referring to me in meetings as old school, the polite corporate way of calling someone obsolete without having the guts to say it to their face. He cancelled one of my major infrastructure audits, called it wasteful, and praised a junior engineer for suggesting a cloud migration plan, an idea I'd proposed 2 months earlier and he'd dismissed at the time. Classic power move: discredit, replace, erase. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself. I just kept watching, listening, taking notes, mentally, of course. I didn't need receipts. I was the receipt. Because here's the thing Cam didn't realize about people like me. We're builders, quiet, methodical, patient. And while he was busy playing chess with pawns, I was playing a different game entirely. One where I controlled the board, one where patience isn't weakness, it's strategy. He thought he was making moves. He had no idea he was walking right into checkmate. By week 3, the vibe in the office was electric, but not the good kind. It was that prickly, nerve-shredding kind of electricity, like the static right before a lightning strike. You could feel it in the way people hunched over their keyboards, the way conversations died whenever someone heard Cam's footsteps echo down the hall. People weren't collaborating anymore. They were surviving. Every morning the calendar updates hit like clockwork. Another department reorg, another vision alignment meeting, another round of mysterious resignations. Only they weren't resignations. They were mutual separations. Cam's favorite new corporate euphemism for cleaning house. The worst part wasn't even the firings, it was the silence. No one said a word when someone's desk sat empty the next morning. No goodbye lunches, no Slack messages. Just a quiet understanding. Speak up and you might be next. Cam moved through the office like a shark, smiling, joking, patting people on the back, but underneath you could see it, the hunger, the need to be seen as the savior. He craved validation the way plants crave sunlight, but the only thing he was growing was resentment. And me? I stayed invisible. I became a ghost in my own office, slipping in early, slipping out late, doing the work no one noticed, but that everyone depended on. Cam made sure to chip away at me too. Little things at first. He'd schedule important architecture meetings and forget to invite me. Then he'd casually announce decisions about the infrastructure I built, decisions that were not only reckless but downright dangerous, without ever asking for input. Once, in a packed all-hands, he introduced the new head of security initiatives, a guy fresh out of grad school with more opinions than experience, and said, "We're bringing in fresh blood. We need energy, not just history." I was standing 15 feet away. Energy, not history. I just smiled and nodded. Because here's the thing about history. It's not just old stories. It's foundation. And without it, all the fresh blood in the world wouldn't save him when things started to crumble. Cam didn't know that the fancy dashboards and shiny pitch decks he loved so much were sitting on top of something much more fragile. An encryption protocol that without me, without my signature, was like a vault with no combination. But why warn a man racing toward a cliff at full speed? Sometimes the best lessons are the ones you learn the hard way. And Cam's lesson. It was coming faster than he could ever imagine. Long before Cam ever set foot in CypherSecure, back when the company was nothing more than a few rented desks and a server room held together with duct tape and prayer, there was the breach. Capital T. Capital B. Hackers had slipped in through a crack in the old system, a simple flaw but deadly. Within 48 hours we'd lost millions in contracts. Clients were calling, regulators were breathing down our necks, and the press was circling like vultures. It was the kind of disaster that shutters startups overnight. But not ours, not on my watch. I locked myself in a conference room for 72 hours straight. Fueled by nothing but bad coffee and worse vending machine sandwiches, I tore down what we had and built something new, from scratch. I created a proprietary encryption protocol, lightweight, unbreakable, and modular enough to evolve with every new threat. It wasn't flashy, it was airtight. When I finally walked out of that room, I handed the old CEO a system that didn't just patch the holes. It made the whole ship unsinkable. He called it a miracle, I called it Tuesday. But more importantly, I called a lawyer. See, the CEO was smart, smarter than most. He knew loyalty had limits and memory was short in this business, so he insisted that we file an IP protection for the protocol, not just under CypherSecure, but with me as the primary inventor. It wasn't about ego. It was insurance for both of us. Buried in my employment agreement was a clause so dry and boring, even most lawyers wouldn't bother to read it twice. It outlined that any innovations I developed during the crisis, under the special project terms, would retain a dual ownership. CypherSecure could use it, sure, but the source, the rights to modify, license, or extend it, those belonged to me. Only me. And that encryption protocol? It wasn't just a piece of code. It was the backbone of our entire platform. Every client relied on it. Every contract cited it. Every dollar we made flowed, directly or indirectly, through what I'd built. But here's the real kicker. The usage license had to be renewed every 3 years, explicitly, in writing, signed by both parties. The last renewal? It was about to expire. And funny thing, Cam hadn't signed it, too busy replacing people and flexing on LinkedIn to bother with boring old paperwork, which meant legally, Cypher Secure was about 3 days away from losing the right to use the system that kept them alive. And if they kept using it without renewal, well, that's called infringement. Cam thought he was cutting dead weight. What he was really doing was sawing through the branch he was standing on. And when it cracked, when it snapped and sent him crashing down, I'd be right there, watching, waiting, smiling. By the time the 4th week rolled around, it was clear Cam wasn't just gunning for innovation, he was gunning for me. It started subtle. He'd hijack meetings where I was supposed to present architecture updates, cutting me off mid-sentence with that fake chuckle of his, acting like I was some relic from a bygone era. "Thanks, Ethan," he'd say, clapping his hands like a kindergarten teacher. But let's pivot to more forward-thinking strategies. Forward-thinking, in his language, meant reckless shortcuts dressed up in tech jargon he barely understood. Then he started emailing my direct reports behind my back, setting up private meetings, making suggestions that sounded a lot like instructions, undermining every decision I made without confronting me outright. It wasn't enough to replace me. He wanted to erase me, brick by brick. But here's the thing about slow erosion. It's easy to ignore if you're not paying attention. And I was paying very close attention. I sat through every slight, every backhanded comment, every accidental exclusion from critical conversations. I let them wash over me like waves on stone. Because when you've built something from the ground up, you learn patience the way a mason learns mortar. Slow, steady, precise. Cam thought he was wearing me down. What he didn't realize was that every little act of disrespect was just another name added to the list of people who'd regret underestimating me. One Thursday afternoon, he held a meeting, a big one, all hands, cameras on, smiles forced. "We're moving toward a new era at Cypher Secure," he announced, pacing the room like he was auditioning for a TED Talk. "An era of agility, creativity, and above all, speed." He turned, locking eyes with me across the table, and smiled that shark smile. "And to get there, sometimes we have to make hard decisions, let go of the old to make space for the new." I didn't flinch, didn't blink. Cam might have thought he was announcing some inevitable, natural change, but what he was really doing was declaring war. And the best part? He'd already lost. Because while he was busy handing out pink slips and high-fiving the board, the real countdown had already started, quietly, invisibly, like a fuse burning beneath his feet. Tick, tick, tick. 3 days left. And Cam was too busy celebrating to smell the smoke. Friday morning arrived with a kind of stillness that didn't feel natural. You know that eerie calm right before a thunderstorm. The air goes thick and the world holds its breath. That was the office. Except the storm wasn't weather. It was something much worse. At 9:17 a.m., I got the calendar invite. Meeting, Office 401, 9:30 a.m. No subject line, no agenda, just a location. I knew what it was the moment it popped up. Cam didn't even have the decency to pretend otherwise. I closed my laptop, tucked it under my arm and walked down the hallway, past the desks, the forced smiles, the averted eyes. It was funny in a sick way. All the people who used to pull me aside for advice now couldn't even meet my gaze. Fear changes people like that. The HR manager was already waiting when I got there. Clipboard in hand, face set to neutral. Cam leaned casually against the conference table, arms folded, wearing that smug grin like a crown. "Ethan," he said, voice smooth as silk. "Thanks for coming." I nodded, no expression. He didn't offer me a chair. Didn't matter. I wasn't planning to stay long. "I'll get right to it," Cam said, flipping a pen through his fingers like he was about to sign an autograph. "We're restructuring the leadership team. We need a different skill set moving forward, more adaptable, more dynamic. It's not about you personally. It's just the company evolving." I fought the urge to laugh. Not about me personally, the oldest lie in the book. He continued, "Effective immediately, your position is being eliminated. HR has your severance package prepared. Very generous, by the way. And your access will be revoked by noon." I glanced at the HR manager. She couldn't even look me in the eye. I turned back to Cam, studying him. Not angry, not hurt, curious. He had no idea what he was doing. He was so proud of himself, standing there, delivering what he thought was a masterstroke. But the thing about knives is, if you don't know how to hold them, you end up cutting yourself. I didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't even speak. I just extended my hand. Cam hesitated, just for a second, before shaking it, that false confidence faltering ever so slightly. "Best of luck, Ethan," he said, as if the words would sting. I smiled, calm, polite, deliberate. "You too, Cam." He blinked, thrown off by how easy I was making it. As I left the room, I could feel his eyes on my back, waiting for me to crack, to break, to react. But I didn't. Because what Cam didn't realize was that he hadn't fired an employee. He had unplugged the very machine keeping his empire alive. And the clock? It was still ticking. 2 days left. I packed up my desk slower than I needed to. Not because I was dragging it out. No, I wanted to remember. I took my time slipping the few personal items into a box. A photo of my niece on her first day of school, a stress ball shaped like a brain someone had given me years ago as a joke, and a coffee mug with a chip on the rim. A quiet trophy from late nights and system launches that no one else remembered. No drama, no scene. Just done. Around me, the office buzzed with the awkward silence of people pretending not to watch. Some gave me brief, sympathetic nods. Most just looked away, busying themselves with screens and keyboards like their lives depended on it. That's how fear works in places like this. Not loud, not messy. Silent, sterile, surgical. I walked the long path to the exit, past rows of desks, past the trophy case that held our Best Startup Security Platform awards, awards built on the foundation I had laid. No applause now, no backslaps or handshakes. Just the quiet shuffle of feet and the soft hum of machines that, unbeknownst to them, were about to stop working in ways they couldn't even imagine. When I stepped out into the parking lot, the cold air hit me like a slap. Not painful, but bracing. I stood there for a moment, staring at the grey clouds rolling in over the Denver skyline. The whole world stretched out and heavy with something unsaid. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry. What I felt was harder to name, a low simmering current of adrenaline mixed with clarity. I set the box gently in the trunk of my car, slid behind the wheel, and just sat there for a second, hands on the steering wheel, breathing. Cam thought he had won. He thought he had neutralized a threat, but what he'd really done was free me from the last shred of obligation I felt to stay silent. Because now it wasn't about loyalty. It was about leverage. And I had more of it than he could possibly comprehend. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced back at the building one last time, the tall glass facade reflecting a sky that was rapidly darkening. It looked stable from the outside, solid, permanent. But I knew the truth. That building was a castle made of sand. And the tide. It was already coming in. I didn't tell anyone. Not my sister, who would have said I should have left months ago. Not my best friend, who would have shown up with a bottle of bourbon and a list of revenge ideas longer than a CVS receipt. Not even my old mentor, who'd probably remind me that dignity is a weapon, too. No, I needed silence. Not mourning, not plotting. Clarity. I spent Friday night walking aimlessly through the city, weaving past the after-work crowds in bars, the laughter spilling onto the sidewalks like static noise. Nobody noticed me, just another man in a coat with too many things on his mind. The cold air bit at my skin, but it didn't hurt. It sharpened me, stripped everything down to essentials. By the time I got home, my mind was a clean slate. I dug through my home office, past the usual clutter, until I found what I was looking for. A plain manila folder, thick with papers. My original employment contract, annotated and highlighted. The IP licensing agreement. Renewal notices. Receipts. The old CEO's signature glared back at me from the pages, bold, confident, deliberate. Proof that the encryption protocol, the very backbone of Cipher Secure's operations, was protected under my name, subject to a renewable license that had to be explicitly signed. Explicitly. And the current license? It expired Sunday night. No renewal, no extension, no loopholes. Legally, if Cipher Secure continued using the protocol after midnight Sunday, they'd be infringing on my intellectual property. And infringement wasn't just a slap on the wrist, it was lawsuits, injunctions, frozen client contracts, investor panic. Cam had been so busy clearing the old guard that he never bothered to understand the ground he was standing on. And me? I had the ground in my pocket. Saturday morning, with the sun barely up, I sat at my desk drafting an email. Short, precise. No anger, no threats, just facts. I attached a formal Notice of IP License Expiration letter, clear language, references to contract sections, deadlines. Subject line, Notice of Intellectual Property Usage. Expiration, immediate attention required. I addressed it to Cipher Secure's legal department, CC'd the Chief Compliance Officer, just for good measure, and of course Cam. I didn't hit send, not yet. I spent the rest of the day double-checking every clause, every legal precedent I could find. Called a lawyer friend under the guise of hypotheticals, just to confirm I wasn't missing anything. I wasn't. By the time night fell, I had everything ready. I poured myself a drink, sat by the window, and watched as the city lights blinked to life against the dark. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but this wasn't revenge. This was accountability. And Sunday would be delivery day. Sunday morning was unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't just happen, the kind that waits. I woke up early, made a pot of strong coffee, and sat at my kitchen table staring at the laptop. The screen glowed, soft and expectant. The email draft sat open, cursor blinking at the end like a heartbeat. It would have been easy to hesitate, to wonder if I was overreacting, if I should just move on, let it go. But then I thought of Cam's face in that meeting, the smug certainty, the dismissive smirk, the way he tossed away a decade of work like it was yesterday's newspaper, and just like that, any doubt evaporated. At exactly 8 a.m., I hit send. No fanfare, no fireworks, just a single click. The email zipped off into the void, landing in inboxes across Cipher Secure's executive and legal teams like a silent grenade, pin pulled, timer ticking. I leaned back, sipped my coffee, and waited. Not that I expected an immediate reaction. No, I knew how these things worked. Corporate machinery moves slowly on weekends. Executives don't check emails. Legal doesn't lift a finger unless there's a fire. But Monday? Monday would be different. Monday, the fire would already be inside the house. By 1 p.m., my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. A voicemail came through. "Hi Ethan, this is Vanessa from HR. We'd like to clarify a few things regarding your departure paperwork. Could you give us a call back when you get a chance?" Clarify. Translation, panic. Another missed call an hour later, this time from the General Counsel's office. By evening, another voicemail. "Ethan, this is Mark from Legal. We really need to touch base about some licensing details. Please call me back as soon as possible." They were starting to understand. Cam, of course, stayed silent. No email, no call. Probably thought he could still spin it, downplay it, wriggle his way out like he always did. I didn't respond. Didn't even pick up my phone. The longer I stayed quiet, the more they'd sweat. The more time they'd have to realize just how deep they were already in. I spent the evening reading, the phone buzzing on silent beside me, a steady stream of missed calls stacking up like unpaid bills. As the sun set, I stood by the window, watching the sky turn the color of bruises and old regrets. Inside Cipher Secure's walls they were scrambling, piecing together contracts, digging through legal archives, desperately trying to find a way out. But there wasn't one. At exactly midnight, the license expired. Cipher Secure was now, officially, legally, operating on stolen property. And me? I slept like a baby. Monday morning arrived, grey and cold. I was already awake, coffee in hand, watching the clock tick toward 8 a.m., the official start of the work week. Normally this time of day, Cipher Secure would hum to life. Systems booting up, servers syncing, clients logging into their dashboards without a second thought. But today wasn't normal. At 8:07 a.m., my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. A message from an old coworker. Dude, did you hear? Systems are down, everything, clients can't access anything. Cam's losing it. I smiled, slow and steady. Another text followed. They're saying it's a technical glitch. LOL. Sure, let's call it that. Emails started flooding in, not from friends but from Cypher Secure's automated systems. Alert, back-end authentication failed. Alert, client portal access denied. Alert, internal server error, investigating. Each one was like a drumbeat, steady and inevitable. I leaned back, sipping my coffee, watching as the carefully constructed house of cards started to collapse. At 8:32 a.m., Cam finally broke his silence. An email subject line screaming, "Urgent, immediate action required." I didn't open it, didn't need to. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, another call. This time, I recognized the number. Legal. I ignored it too. They were realizing, slowly, painfully, that without the encryption protocol, without the system I'd built, they couldn't authenticate users, couldn't secure client data, couldn't meet compliance standards, couldn't operate. Every second of downtime wasn't just lost productivity, it was breach of contract. Every minute, they were hemorrhaging credibility, trust, and money. I checked my inbox. Another email, more desperate this time. "Ethan, we need to resolve this immediately. Please contact us." Mark, legal. Attached was a calendar invite for an emergency meeting at 10:30 a.m. I didn't respond. Let them stew. At 9:30 a.m., I got another text from a friend still inside. Clients are furious. Some are threatening lawsuits. Cam is locked in a meeting with the board. It's a bloodbath. I sat there watching the chaos unfold, calm as a still lake while a hurricane ripped through the company. Cam thought he had everything under control. He thought firing me was the end of the problem. But what he didn't understand, or what people like him never understand, is that the foundation of anything worth building isn't flash. It's trust, respect, precision. And when you dismantle that, you don't just create a problem, you create a catastrophe. By 9:45 a.m., my phone was a battlefield. Missed calls stacked up faster than I could count. Legal, HR, even the chief operating officer who barely knew my name before today. Emails flooded in too, each one more desperate than the last. "Ethan, urgent. Please call immediately. Ethan, we believe there's been a misunderstanding about the licensing terms. Ethan, we need your help to restore system access. Please respond ASAP. Misunderstanding, help." It was almost funny how quickly incompetent deadweight became indispensable savior once the gears stopped turning. Cam, of course, hadn't called, not directly. No, people like him send others to do their begging for them. But at 10:12 a.m. that changed. A new number popped up, one I knew well. I let it ring, let it buzz once, twice, then picked up casually. "Ethan," Cam said, his voice tight, sharp around the edges, like a man trying to pretend he wasn't bleeding out. I said nothing, just waited. "There's been some confusion," he started, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. "The license? It's a clerical oversight. Legal's working on it, but look, we need to get you back in here to sort this out, face to face, clear the air." Still, I said nothing. "Ethan," he repeated, voice lower now, almost pleading. "This doesn't have to get ugly. Let's be adults about it." Ugly. Adults. Funny words coming from a man who fired me without a second thought just days earlier. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the clear blue sky. For the first time in a long time, I felt light, free. "Cam," I said finally, my voice calm, steady. "This isn't personal." I could practically hear the confusion on his end. "It's not?" he repeated. "No," I said, "it's contractual." And then I hung up. Simple. Final. No yelling, no threats, no drama, just a line drawn in concrete. 15 minutes later, another email landed, this one from legal, marked high priority, requesting immediate meeting to discuss new licensing terms. Terms. Now they understood. I wasn't coming back as an employee, with a badge and a desk and a nameplate on the door. No. I was coming back on my terms, external, independent, expensive, and they could either meet me at the table or keep watching everything burn. At exactly 11 Mawis M, my calendar chimed. A formal invite from Cypher Secure's legal team. Urgent, licensing resolution meeting, executive conference room. No preamble, no apologies. Just desperation, neatly formatted in corporate fonts. I closed my laptop, grabbed my jacket, and headed out. When I arrived at the office, it was a different world from the one I'd left just days ago. The lobby was tense, the receptionist tapping nervously at her keyboard, avoiding eye contact. Employees clustered in quiet corners, whispering, darting glances at the elevators like kids waiting for the principal. When I walked through the glass doors, heads turned. Subtle but unmistakable. There's a different kind of gravity when someone walks back in not as a ghost, but as a reckoning. I took the elevator up to the top floor, the numbers blinking slowly. Each floor another reminder of how far this was from the world Cam thought he ruled. When the doors slid open, the conference room was already full. The general counsel stood at the head of the table, flanked by a small army of assistants, compliance officers, and external advisors. No Cam. Interesting. They didn't offer me a seat at first, a power play. I didn't sit. I didn't need to. Ethan, the general counsel started, his tone polished, rehearsed. We appreciate you coming in on short notice. I nodded, silent. We've reviewed the terms of the original licensing agreement, he continued, adjusting his glasses. It appears there was an oversight regarding renewal. An oversight. Corporate language for someone really, really messed up. And as you're aware, continued use without an active license could expose the company to significant legal and financial risk. I didn't reply. Let them sweat. We'd like to propose a retroactive renewal of the license, effective immediately. Same terms as before, full operational access, no interruption of services. He smiled, the kind of smile people practice in mirrors before salary negotiations. I smiled too, but not the kind he was expecting. That won't work for me, I said, voice calm even. A ripple passed through the room. The assistant beside him glanced nervously at her notepad. Another advisor started scribbling furiously. What terms are you proposing? The counsel asked, trying to maintain his composure. Simple, direct. I pulled a neatly folded sheet of paper from my jacket and laid it on the table, deliberate, almost casual. $2 million licensing fee, non-negotiable, annual renewal, exclusive consulting contract for 12 months at a premium rate, and public attribution, encryption system designed and architected by Ethan Miller, included in all client-facing materials. The silence that followed was dense, thick enough to taste. The counsel cleared his throat. That's significantly higher than the previous arrangement. I shrugged. It's reflective of market value and the current operational risk you're facing, I said. You're not just paying for code, you're paying to keep your clients, your contracts, your reputation. He shifted uncomfortably, looking around at his team, searching for backup that wasn't there. We'll need to take this to the board for approval, he said finally. Of course, I replied. Take all the time you need. I turned, walking calmly toward the door, pausing just long enough to add, but every hour you wait? I smiled. You lose another client, another dollar, another inch of credibility. I left them there, a room full of powerful people, suddenly powerless. Because now they weren't negotiating with an employee. They were negotiating with the owner of the ground they were standing on. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed again. Cam. Persistent, if nothing else. This time, I picked up. Ethan, he started, trying to inject some of that old authority into his voice. I think we need to talk. Off the record. I didn't respond. He continued, filling the silence like a man terrified of what it meant. Legal's overreacting. We can fix this. Don't need to get aggressive. Aggressive, another word for, you're making me uncomfortable by standing up for yourself. I have a conference room reserved upstairs, he added quickly. Just you and me. Let's sort this out. Like adults. I considered it for a second. Not because I thought he had anything worthwhile to say, but because some conversations are worth having just to watch someone squirm. 5 minutes, I said. No more. When I stepped into the private conference room, Cam was already pacing, jaw tight, forehead creased. The king of cool, finally cracking under pressure. Look, he started, gesturing broadly like he could wave the problem away. This whole situation, it's a misunderstanding. You and I both know the license stuff is legal mumbo-jumbo, bureaucratic nonsense. I said nothing, just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. He mistook my silence for weakness. Again. We can settle this cleanly, he said. I'm authorized to offer you a bonus, generous severance, maybe even a consulting role if you want to stay involved at a lower intensity. No hard feelings. I raised an eyebrow, amused. He didn't get it. He still thought I was negotiating from the same place I was when he fired me, that I wanted to be part of Cypher Secure, that I needed to be. I stepped forward, slow, deliberate. You don't seem to understand, Cam, I said, my voice low, steady. I'm not coming back, not as an employee, not as a contractor, not as anything that puts me under your thumb again. He opened his mouth, but I kept going. You're not negotiating with someone who needs a job. You're negotiating with someone who owns the keys to your castle. I could see the moment it hit him, the way his eyes shifted, his shoulders tensed, the full weight of what he'd done, what he'd broken, crashing down like a collapsing house of cards. This isn't personal, Cam, I said, echoing his words from the day he fired me. It's contractual. I turned to leave, pausing just long enough to throw one final nail in the coffin. And one more thing, I said over my shoulder. You might want to start polishing your resume. His face twisted, a flash of anger, fear, and disbelief all at once. But I was already gone, walking back down the hallway, each step solid, certain, final. By the time I got back to my car, the board had the licensing proposal in front of them. And for the first time in days, Cam wasn't the one leading the conversation. He was the problem being discussed. Monday afternoon moved slower than molasses. I knew what was happening behind those glossy glass walls. Meetings, calls, panic, the kind of internal chaos you can't smooth over with free lunches and motivational emails. Cam, though, he wasn't the type to go down without a show. At 3:00 p.m. I got another email. This one from Cam himself. Ethan, final attempt to resolve. Let's find a middle ground. Final attempt. I almost laughed. Cam was clinging to pride like a man grasping at the last rung of a broken ladder. He thought he could salvage this, throw a few perks at me, massage my ego, patch up the wreckage without admitting how badly he had misplayed his hand. But some things aren't negotiable. Respect, trust, value. I let the email sit there, unread. Because by then it wasn't about what Cam wanted. It was about what the board needed, and what they needed was me. By 4:00 p.m., the General Counsel called. We've reviewed your proposal, he said, voice tight but professional. The board has approved the licensing terms. I stayed silent, letting him sweat for just a heartbeat longer. And the attribution? I asked calmly. There was a pause, the kind where you can hear someone physically swallowing their pride. Yes, he said finally. Full attribution as requested, in all client-facing and marketing materials. I leaned back in my chair, letting the victory settle. We'll need a few days to finalize the paperwork, he added. Take your time, I said, already knowing they'd expedite it faster than you could say stockholder lawsuit. As I hung up, I glanced at my phone. Another missed call from Cam. Another voicemail I wouldn't listen to. Later that evening, a friend still inside sent me a message. Cam's in a tailspin. Word is the board's calling an emergency session tomorrow. No one's saying it out loud yet, but it doesn't look good for him. I didn't respond right away. I was sitting at my kitchen table, pen in hand, signing the initial licensing agreement, not as an employee but as an external partner. No office badge, no manager, no chain of command, independent, untouchable. The document was crisp and clean, each signature a nail in the coffin of the old Cypher Secure, the one that thought people like me were disposable. As I set the pen down, my phone buzzed again, a final, desperate text from Cam. Ethan, let's talk. Don't do this. You're better than this. I stared at the message for a long moment. Better than this? No, Cam, I'm just better at this. I didn't reply. Some things don't deserve an answer. Tuesday morning arrived, crisp and bright. The kind of morning that looks innocent enough until you realize it's the start of a reckoning. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, I sent one final email. Not to Cam, not to legal. To the board. Subject line, re-licensing terms, system integrity and leadership conduct. It wasn't long or dramatic, I kept it clean, professional. a clear timeline of events, the creation and ownership of the encryption protocol, the expiration of the license, the illegal continuation of its use, and finally, the leadership failure that led to the entire disaster. Cam's refusal to renew, his ignorance of critical IP terms, his reckless handling of internal resources. No adjectives, no accusations, just facts. And facts, when lined up neatly enough, have a way of cutting deeper than any insult. I closed with a simple line. If this is how leadership manages internal innovation, how can stakeholders trust them to manage external partnerships, vendors, or regulatory compliance? Send. I leaned back, watching the email vanish into cyberspace, a digital guillotine. By noon, my phone lit up with a message from an old colleague. Board meeting happening now. Cam's not coming out of this clean. At 12:43 p.m., another text. He's been called in, looks bad, real bad. By 1 p.m., the board chair sent me a formal email. Ethan, thank you for your clarity and professionalism. Please be assured we take these matters seriously and are reviewing the situation with full transparency. We expect to finalize the licensing agreement within 48 hours, as per your terms. Translation: we believe you. We're moving. Cam is finished. I pictured the scene. Cam, pacing, sweating, trying to charm his way out, trying to spin the facts, trying to blame legal, blame HR, blame anyone but himself. But you can't sweet-talk your way past a paper trail. You can't charm your way past math. And you definitely can't spin your way past a system meltdown that cost the company millions in client trust and contracts. By 3 hours p.m., word was out. Cam was suspended, pending a full investigation. No fanfare, no goodbye speech. Just an internal memo, dripping with carefully chosen corporate lingo. Leadership transition effective immediately. I didn't gloat, didn't cheer, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about respect, the kind of respect people like Cam never give until it's ripped out of their hands. And me? I didn't just get my respect. I got my name, in the contract, in the credits, in the story. The official announcement went out Friday afternoon. Short, clinical, brutal. Effective immediately, Cameron Tate has been relieved of his duties as CTO of Cipher Secure, following a thorough review by the board. The company is committed to ensuring operational excellence and upholding the highest standards of leadership accountability. No thank yous, no farewell parties, just a quiet erasure, the same way he had tried to erase me. Attached at the bottom, almost as an afterthought but written in bold, Cipher Secure acknowledges the foundational contributions of Ethan Miller, lead architect of our core encryption platform, and is proud to announce a new licensing partnership ensuring the continued integrity and security of our systems. Foundational, acknowledged, public. It hit harder than I expected. Not because I needed the recognition, but because so many people like me never get it. They build the foundations others stand on, only to be forgotten the minute the walls go up. Not this time. A few old colleagues messaged me after the announcement. Cautious, respectful. Congrats. Well deserved. Glad someone finally stood up. I didn't say much back, didn't have to, because the real win wasn't the title or the money, though the money was good. It was the shift. The reminder that quiet work matters, that real leadership isn't loud or flashy. It's stable. It's thoughtful. It's resilient. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's walking back into the building, not as an employee with a badge, but as a partner with a contract, with your name in the credits, with your value in writing. I stayed on for a few months, consulting quietly, setting the systems back on track, mentoring the younger engineers on how to build and protect what matters. Not because I had to, because I chose to. When my time ended, there was no big send-off, no speeches, just a final signature on the last document, a few firm handshakes, and the click of the elevator doors closing behind me one last time. I walked out into the sharp winter air, feeling lighter than I had in years. No anger, no bitterness, just peace. Later that week, as I sat in a quiet cafe drafting the first plans for my own consulting firm, a message popped up on my phone from one of the interns I'd mentored along the way. Saw the announcement. Thanks for showing us how to stand your ground. Legend. I smiled, closed the laptop, and took a sip of my coffee. They say Monday is the worst day of the week, but not for me. Not anymore.